So today there's this word in our responsorial psalm called covenant. And it's important for us to remember what that means. So there's something called a contract, and there's something called a covenant. And they're very different things. When I go to buy ice cream at the Michoacana right downtown, I love that place. I go there, and there's a certain relationship there in which I have money, I want services, I ask for that kind of ice cream, coco, and then because I give this, they give that to me, and then we're friendly about that, but that's it. That's what you call a contract. It's a kind of relationship that you need something done, someone is able to offer something, and you're able to work together, but then once you're finished with the service, that's it. And then the next time I go for ice cream, there's in a sense a new contract. So in those kind of situations, you're sharing items, you're sharing goods. Covenant is something different. A covenant is where you share family. You don't go to the store, you don't go to Subway or ice cream store or whatever and say, I want to buy ice cream. The person's not going to hear, you want to marry me? What? Like, that would be very weird. Because a covenant is actually about sharing a life with someone. It's about sharing persons, not just things. Do you see how in our world sometimes we can get that confused, and we can treat people like things, and we can sort of think that our relationship with someone is a covenant, but if it's a contract, then we're not really treating them very, very well. Just like we don't want to treat ice cream in the sense of a covenant, saying, I give my life to you, ice cream. No, once the ice cream's eaten and it goes down into your tummy, that's the end of it. It doesn't continue. And so the Lord, it says here, the Lord will remember his covenant forever. And this is what we're hearing in that first reading. Might be a little confusing, there's a lot of big words and stuff like that in there, but ultimately what it's talking about is about making Abraham part of God's family. And the way a covenant happens is there's some kind of sacrifice. So a lot of times what they do is they'll take an animal and they'll go and chop it in two. And then they'll put one side on this side, another side on this side. And the two people that are going to become family, so whether in marriage or in adoption or something in which you have maybe two chieftains who are saying, we don't want to fight anymore, and so we're going to be forever binded to each other. We're going to become family. We're going to become part of the tribe. You see this in a lot of like Native American aspects. You become part of the tribe in something like this. And the two people would then go through those two halves of the sacrifice. And the blood of that animal offering would be sprinkled on them. And they would say these words. They would say, if I break my end of the deal, may I become like those things on either side of me. Yikes, that's pretty intense. But what God does with Abraham is Abraham watches, but God's the only one who goes through these two pieces of the sacrificial offering. He goes through, if you read in the book of Genesis, when he says, I'm going to make your children, your descendants, as numerous as the stars. And Abraham, he has this experience of the Lord going through these two things. And what's amazing about that is what God is saying is, I will keep my end of the deal, but even if you break the deal, then I'll be the one that's going to suffer. Do you see how crazy that is? But that's God's faithfulness. That's God's way of saying, you have an anchor in me. Because even if you fall away, I'm actually going to come and I'm going to suffer on your behalf so that you can get back into the family. And isn't that what Jesus did? Jesus became the sacrifice. And that's why we have here, it says, Jesus, he's entered on our behalf as forerunner. So he's running ahead. He's showing us the truth of the Father's love for us, because he's the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. And what does Melchizedek do? He takes bread and he takes wine and he offers it. Jesus takes bread and wine and he says, this is my body, this is my blood. But then we get to understand why he said that when he actually gives his life on the cross. Because the two of those things are connected. Because every single time you go into a covenant, not a contract, there's always going to be a sacrifice. And then there's going to be eating that sacrifice. So the Passover, you have the sacrifice of the lamb. You take the lamb and you put it on the doorpost. But then you eat the lamb. There are many other places in Scripture where it talks about you have this covenant that's forged, and then you have a celebration. You eat of that sacrifice. I mean, we could even see the wedding reception in a certain sense, a little like that. You share this meal together, you celebrate with food, and it's a way of continuing that promise. So, we now see in the gospel about the Pharisees who are spying on Jesus and the disciples. It's sort of like they're like hiding everywhere. It's like, where's Waldo? It's like, where's the Pharisees? They're always somewhere. They got their binoculars out, they're looking, they're like, oh, we're going to get him this time. And so they see that the disciples are they're working on the Sabbath. And one of the laws is you can't pick grain, you can't work in the farm on the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees are like, I'm not going to do it. But then Jesus says, remember what David himself did when he was hungry. And he went and ate this bread of offering that only the priest could lawfully eat, which shows that David is also a king, but he's also a priest. Who else is a king and a priest? It's Jesus, the son of David. And he shares it with his companions. He takes that bread and he shares it with us. This king priest who offers bread and gives it to us. It sounds a lot like what's happening at Mass. But then he goes on, he says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That is why the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. And it's important for us to see here that this Sabbath is like the celebration of the wedding. It's a joyous time. It's a time about relationship, and it's a time of how Jesus offered his very life for us so that we could be part of the family. And so the more that we start seeing that for us, the Sunday celebration is our Sabbath, if we start looking at it in that sense of this relationship with God, then it allows us to rejoice in what the Sabbath is really about. It's about freeing us to not be slaves, to be family. Whereas the Pharisees, they missed that. And because they missed that relationship aspect, they got stuck in all the details. And they weren't able to really see that God was offering them a friendship. And that's what Jesus has come to take to a whole nother level. So let's ask the Lord, help me to treat my baptism, because that's where we enter into the covenant, not as a contract, not as merely just, when I need something, God, I'm going to buy my ice cream, and then when I'm finished with you, well, then, I'll come back another time when I need you. Don't we treat God a little like that sometimes? When we need him, then he's right on our lips and we're saying, God, help me. But when we're comfortable, when we're fine, then we kind of don't need to go to the ice cream store anymore. Are we treating God as the ice cream store, or are we actually treating him as family? And family, there's a constant relationship. It's a contract that doesn't end because it's not a contract. It's a covenant. And when we understand that, the Mass comes alive. Because then we realize we're not just doing something, we're not just in a contract with God saying, well, I know you're supposed to do good things for me, you're supposed to give me the ice cream, and I know I have to offer something to you, so I'm going to give you cash. And that's sort of like my Mass experience. And if that's all that we're doing, then pretty soon we're just going to get tired of that. But if we see it as, this is a time to come to our family reunion, to come to our Father who just has his arms wide open saying, I want to give you a big hug, then why would we not want to come and experience that embrace of our Father?